exploring quantum reality and beyond, quantum body and beyond, quantum mind and beyond. I wanted to share with you a perspective on consciousness and why the Eastern wisdom traditions and Western science collide even on the definition of consciousness. So a while back at the Science of Consciousness, I made the statement, much to the annoyance of many people, scientists. I made the statement there can never be a science of consciousness because scientific pursuit is an activity in consciousness. After all, theories are conceived in consciousness, experiments are designed in consciousness, observations are made in consciousness. So science is an activity in consciousness, and it cannot explain consciousness itself because consciousness is the source of that activity. And everything we study about consciousness in neuroscience is inferential. We study, things like conscious experience and their neural correlates. But we don't study consciousness directly. The only direct experience of consciousness is self-awareness. Self, when we say self, I am, we refer to the subject of all experience. And science deals with the objects of all experience. So there's a fundamental difference even in the definition. So that's where the problem lies, why East and West don't agree on what consciousness is. So let me unpack this for you a little bit, okay? So in science, we emphasize objective measurement, observable behavior, and quantifiable data from experiments. In science, we also focus on the individual conscious experience, how it arises from the brain, if it arises from the brain. That's the hard problem, we can't tell. And its various cognitive functions. The terms used in consciousness are things like conscious states, mental states, neural correlates of consciousness, or neural correlates of experience. On the other hand, Eastern philosophy has a different definition of consciousness. It embraces the subjective experience of consciousness and the ground of all experiences, introspection, non-dualistic perspectives. And so Eastern philosophical explorations of consciousness consider consciousness the fundamental ground of all reality, not just a product of the brain or individual minds. So the terms used are awareness, emptiness, non-duality, Buddha nature, self-nature. So the key difference lies in the scope of just that word, consciousness. Scientists view it as a product of the brain, a phenomenon within the individual, while Eastern philosophy considers it as the grand and infinite ground of all being itself, encompassing everything, including the observer and the observed. And this difference leads to confusion in consciousness studies. When trying to compare the two perspectives, we are not even actually defining our terms, usually, in these conversations. Scientific findings on brain activity during specific conscious states may not translate directly to the Eastern understanding of the underlying nature of consciousness. So here are some points to consider. Can science ever disprove Eastern philosophical views of consciousness? Can science ever disprove? Remember, science is based on something called falsification. If you can't falsify something, then it is accepted as true. So, can science ever disprove Eastern philosophical views of consciousness? This is unlikely, as science generally deals with the realm of the measurable and observable, while Eastern philosophy ventures into the realm of subjective experiences and non duality, which are less accessible to scientific methods. Less accessible. I didn't say not accessible for the following reasons. Because I think that the two perspectives can converge. There's growing interest now in integrating scientific findings with Eastern contemplative practices to gain a more holistic understanding of consciousness. For example, neuroscientists are studying the effects of meditation and brain activity and its potential benefits for mental health. But just the fact that there is something called neuroplasticity, that with meditation we can change the neural landscape of the brain, and there is something called epigenetics, that our experiences can modulate epigenetic activity and therefore the activity of genes through on-off switches such as methylation and acylation. If we just look at those experiments in epigenetics and in neuroplasticity and ask ourselves, what is the subject of experience? And this subject of experience, when we get to it through meditation, mindfulness, introspection, self-inquiry, and transcendence, this subject of all experience is modifying everything, modifying neural landscape of the brain, gene activity, and also the observer and the observed simultaneously. So I think a clarity on semantics could actually integrate the two disciplines, science and Eastern perspectives, meditative traditions, into a more holistic understanding of consciousness, where we will begin to understand that there is no hard problem of consciousness. There's only the hard problem of matter, because matter is a modified form of consciousness, and yet scientists today feel that matter is observer independent. I'd love to know your thoughts on this.